I never thought my signature would be worth millions or land someone behind bars for a quarter century. My ordinary life in Lakeside Pines, a picturesque suburban community just outside of Portland, Oregon, was flipped upside down when I discovered Patricia Miller, our HOA president, had forged my name on documents selling my deceased grandmother's property out from under me. My name is Quinn Matthews, and this is how I uncovered one of the largest HOA fraud schemes in American history. When Grandma Elaine passed away in January 2023, I inherited her charming two-story colonial on Evergreen Lane. It was the only property she owned, and according to her will, it was now mine. The house held special memories, summer vacations spent climbing the oak tree in the backyard, holiday gatherings around the stone fireplace, and the comforting smell of her apple cinnamon pie that seemed permanently baked into the kitchen walls. I had been living in a cramped apartment in downtown Portland, so the inheritance was a godsend. A spacious home in a beautiful neighborhood, mortgage-free. The place needed updates, but I was handy enough to tackle most of them myself. My plan was to move in by spring, after handling the estate paperwork and making some basic renovations. That's when I first met Patricia Miller, president of the Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association. She appeared on my doorstep one crisp February morning while I was measuring the living room windows for new treatments. "You must be Elaine's grandson," she said, not bothering to introduce herself. She was a stern-looking woman in her late 50s with bottle blonde hair cut in a severe bob and wearing a powder blue pantsuit. "I've been running this association for 15 years now. We have standards here." I extended my hand. "Quinn Matthews, nice to meet you." She ignored my gesture and thrust a thick binder at me. "Our bylaws and covenant restrictions. I suggest you familiarize yourself with them immediately. Your grandmother let some things slide that we won't tolerate moving forward." Before I could respond, she was criticizing the peeling paint on the porch columns and informing me I had exactly 14 days to repaint them, Lakeside approved white 42. "I'm planning a complete exterior renovation," I explained. "I'll make sure everything meets the guidelines." "See that you do," Patricia sniffed. "The Architectural Review Committee meets Thursdays. All exterior modifications must be approved in writing." With that, she turned on her sensible heel and marched back to her Lexus SUV parked in my driveway. I watched her leave, thinking this was just typical HOA bureaucracy. I had no idea she had already set her plan in motion. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, paint samples, and meetings with contractors. I took time off from my job as a software engineer to focus on the house. My boss was understanding I had vacation time saved up, and I could handle some work remotely. It wasn't until March that I received the first strange phone call. "Mr. Matthews, this is Deanne from Heritage Title Company. I'm following up on the closing documents for 247 Evergreen Lane." "Closing documents?" I asked, confused. "I'm not selling the property." There was an awkward pause. "According to our records, you're scheduled to close on the sale next Tuesday. The paperwork was submitted 3 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. There must be some mistake. "I inherited this house from my grandmother. I'm renovating it to move in, not selling it." "Sir, I have a signed purchase agreement here with your signature. The buyer has already transferred earnest money." I felt sick. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." After a tense conversation, Deanne agreed to email me copies of the documents. When they arrived, I stared in disbelief at what appeared to be my signature on a sales agreement for Grandma's house, selling it for $450,000 to a company called Lakeside Development Partners, LLC. The signature looked convincingly like mine, but I had never seen these documents before, let alone signed them. I immediately called my attorney, Marcus Weisberg, a longtime family friend who had handled Grandma's estate. "Marcus, someone's forged my signature on paperwork to sell Grandma's house." He was as shocked as I was. "That's impossible. The property was properly transferred to you in probate. Let me see these documents." After reviewing what I'd been sent, Marcus was troubled. "This is serious, Quinn. Someone's gone to considerable lengths here. The paperwork looks legitimate, except for the fact that you didn't sign it." "What should I do?" "First, we file an emergency injunction to stop any sale. Then we contact the police. This is criminal fraud." My mind was spinning. Who would do this? And how did they get close enough to forge my signature so convincingly? The answer came later that evening when I was combing through the HOA binder Patricia had given me. In the back was a contact sheet for all board members. Listed as the treasurer for Lakeside Pines HOA was one Catherine Brooks, who also happened to be the registered agent for Lakeside Development Partners, LLC, the company buying my grandmother's house. The connection seemed too coincidental. I did some online searching and discovered Patricia Miller was listed as an executive for the same LLC. The next morning, I drove to the local police station to file a report. Detective James Hernandez took my statement, examining the forged documents with interest. "This is sophisticated work," he noted, "not amateur hour. And you say the HOA president and treasurer are connected to the company trying to buy your property?" "Yes, they're both executives in the LLC." Detective Hernandez rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We see property fraud occasionally, but usually targeting the elderly or homes in foreclosure. This is bolder. They're trying to steal a house from someone actively renovating it." He took detailed notes and made copies of everything. "I'll open an investigation, but these cases can take time. Meanwhile, have your lawyer file that injunction immediately." I left feeling slightly better, but still unsettled. The house I'd inherited, the house I was already thinking of as home, had nearly been stolen from under me through forged documents. How many other homeowners might have been victimized? Marcus filed the emergency injunction that afternoon. The judge, concerned about the apparent fraud, granted it immediately, temporarily halting any transaction involving the property. The next day, I decided to attend the weekly HOA meeting. I needed to see Patricia and Catherine in person to watch their reactions when they realized their scheme had been discovered. The meeting was held in the Lakeside Pines Community Center, a brick building at the neighborhood entrance. About 30 residents were scattered throughout rows of folding chairs when I arrived. Patricia stood at a podium at the front, reviewing community violations with obvious relish. The Johnsons on Maple Street have failed to remove their holiday lights, despite 3 warning letters. The board has approved a $75 daily fine until compliance is achieved. I slipped into a seat in the back row as Catherine Brooks, a thin woman with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, detailed the association's finances. She looked nothing like the kind of person who would commit fraud, but I was learning appearances meant little. When the meeting opened for resident comments, I raised my hand. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly when she saw me. "The chair recognizes the resident of 247 Evergreen," she said crisply. I stood. "Thank you. I'm Quinn Matthews, Elaine Matthews' grandson. I've recently discovered someone has forged my signature on documents attempting to sell my property to Lakeside Development Partners. I've filed a police report and obtained a court injunction to stop this fraudulent transaction." The room fell silent. Patricia's face remained impassive, but Catherine's complexion drained of color. "I've also learned," I continued, "that both our HOA president and treasurer are executives in this development company. I'm concerned this may represent a serious conflict of interest." A murmur swept through the room. Patricia banged her gavel. "These accusations are completely unfounded," she snapped. "The board conducts all business ethically and transparently. If there's been some paperwork confusion regarding your property, I'm sure it can be resolved without making wild allegations." "It's not a confusion," I responded firmly. "It's forgery and fraud. The police are investigating, and I intend to press charges." "This is not the appropriate forum for personal grievances," Patricia cut me off. If you have concerns about board members, there's a formal complaint process outlined in Section 16 of the bylaws. I sat down, having said what I came to say. The tension in the room was palpable as Patricia briskly moved on to the next agenda item, but I noticed several residents giving me curious looks. One elderly man even gave me a subtle thumbs up. After the meeting, that same man approached me in the parking lot. He introduced himself as Howard Jenkins, a retired judge who had lived in Lakeside Pines for over 20 years. "I heard what you said in there," he told me, his voice lowered. "And I'm not surprised. Patricia and her cronies have been running this place like a personal fiefdom for years." "There have been rumors." "What kind of rumors?" I asked. Howard glanced around nervously. "Property deals that didn't smell right, selective enforcement of rules against homeowners who opposed the board, special assessments where the money seemed to disappear." "Have others complained?" "A few tried. They either got buried in fines and legal threats or suddenly decided to sell and move away." He handed me his card. "Call me if you need anything. Some of us old-timers have been waiting for someone to stand up to Patricia." I thanked him and headed home, my mind racing. What had started as a single forged signature was starting to look like something much bigger, and I had just publicly challenged the people behind it. That night, I received an email from Heritage Title Company. Despite the court injunction, someone had attempted to rush through the closing on my grandmother's house that afternoon. The escrow officer, alerted by the injunction filing, had refused to proceed and reported the incident. The following morning, a certified letter arrived from the HOA citing me for multiple covenant violations, unapproved exterior modifications, improper storage of construction materials, and creating a public nuisance. The fines totaled $2,750, due within 10 days. It was clear Patricia was retaliating. I called Marcus immediately. "They're trying to bully you," he said after I explained the situation. "Document everything. Take photos of your property showing compliance with the covenants. We'll fight these bogus violations, but more importantly, we need to stay focused on the fraud case." Detective Hernandez called later that day with an update. "We've subpoenaed records from the title company and the LLC. There's definitely something fishy here. The notary who supposedly witnessed your signature doesn't exist. The license number belongs to someone who died 3 years ago." "That's good news, right? Proof of fraud. It's a start," he said cautiously, "but these cases can be complex. We need to establish who actually created and submitted the documents." That evening, I was removing painting supplies from my car when a woman approached hesitantly from across the street. She introduced herself as Rachel Thompson, the HOA secretary. "I heard what happened at the meeting," she said nervously. I think I should tell you something, but not here." She glanced around anxiously. "Can we talk somewhere private?" We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Portland the following morning. Rachel arrived looking tense, constantly checking over her shoulder as if expecting to be followed. "I've been the HOA secretary for 2 years, she began once we had settled with our coffees in a quiet corner. "At first, I thought Patricia was just strict about the rules. But then I started noticing irregularities in the paperwork." "What kind of irregularities?" "Properties being transferred to Lakeside Development at below market rates, special assessments for projects that were never completed, and recently." She lowered her voice. "I found a drawer in Patricia's office filled with signature samples from every homeowner in the community." My blood ran cold. Signature samples? How did she get those? From HOA registration forms, architectural review applications, even complaint letters. Anything with a signature she kept. "And what does she do with them?" Rachel hesitated. "I'm not certain, but Catherine's husband runs a printing company. He has equipment that could easily be used to trace and reproduce signatures." This was the missing piece. I asked Rachel if she would be willing to tell this to the police. She paled. "I'm afraid of what Patricia might do. She knows things about me, about my past. She's threatened other board members who questioned her." "The police can protect you," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely confident. Patricia Miller was starting to sound more like a mob boss than an HOA president. After some convincing, Rachel agreed to speak with Detective Hernandez. Her testimony provided crucial evidence that helped the investigation gain momentum. Over the next few weeks, more residents came forward with stories of suspicious property dealings. Howard Jenkins introduced me to 3 former Lakeside Pines homeowners who described being pressured to sell after receiving mounting HOA violations. In each case, their properties had been purchased by Lakeside Development Partners or an affiliated company. Meanwhile, the retribution against me escalated. My mailbox was vandalized. My contractor reported being threatened and quit. Lakeside Pines Security, hired by the HOA, began photographing my house daily, documenting alleged violations. Despite the harassment, I was determined to see this through. I continued gathering evidence and working with Detective Hernandez, who had now partnered with a white-collar crime specialist from the FBI. The breakthrough came in late April when police executed search warrants on Patricia's home, Catherine's residence, and the HOA office. They discovered a trove of incriminating evidence. Folders containing signature samples from dozens of homeowners, equipment for duplicating signatures, and most damning of all, a ledger detailing property acquisitions and profits dating back nearly a decade. Patricia and Catherine were arrested the following day, along with Catherine's husband and 2 other associates. The charges were serious: organized fraud, forgery, identity theft, and racketeering under state and federal statutes. According to investigators, the scheme had been operating for at least 8 years. The group had illegally acquired over 30 properties in Lakeside Pines and neighboring communities, profiting by millions of dollars. They targeted homes owned by the elderly, the recently deceased, or owners who lived out of state, people less likely to notice fraudulent activity until it was too late. My grandmother's house had caught their attention because of its prime location on a corner lot. Apparently, they had plans to demolish it and build 4 townhomes, which would have violated zoning laws but somehow always got approved by the City Planning Commission. The investigation expanded to include city officials who might have been complicit in approving these irregular developments. 2 planning commissioners and a permit officer were eventually indicted as well. As news of the arrests spread, the community was in shock. An emergency meeting was called to appoint an interim HOA board. Howard Jenkins was elected temporary president, with a mandate to reform the association's governance and restore transparency. In the months that followed, more victims came forward. The case against Patricia and her co-conspirators grew stronger as prosecutors uncovered the full extent of their operation. It wasn't just Lakeside Pines; they had targeted properties in 5 different communities across 2 counties. The trial began in February 2024, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first appeared on my doorstep with her binder of rules. I was called as a key witness, describing how I discovered the forged documents and connected them to the HOA leadership. Patricia remained defiant throughout, maintaining her innocence even as the evidence mounted against her. Catherine, however, eventually agreed to a plea deal, testifying against her former colleagues in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted 6 weeks, revealing the intricate details of the fraud scheme. The jury heard testimony from dozens of victims, forensic accountants, and handwriting experts. They saw evidence of forged signatures, fraudulent notary stamps, and manipulated property records. On April 10, 2024, the verdict came down, guilty on all counts. 2 months later, at the sentencing hearing, Patricia Miller faced the judge with the same imperious attitude she had displayed at HOA meetings. Judge Cassandra Wilson was not impressed. "Mrs. Miller, you abused your position of trust to orchestrate a sophisticated fraud scheme that victimized numerous homeowners. You showed no remorse throughout these proceedings and attempted to intimidate witnesses. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison and orders restitution in the amount of $4.7 million to your victims. As Patricia was led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction, only relief that justice had been served and that other homeowners would be protected from similar schemes in the future. The aftermath was complicated. Many fraudulent property transfers had to be unwound through civil courts. Lakeside Pines established a completely new HOA structure with strict oversight and term limits for board members. The state legislature even introduced a bill, informally known as the Patricia's Law, strengthening regulations on homeowners associations and establishing criminal penalties for HOA board members who abuse their positions. As for me, I eventually completed the renovations on Grandma's house and moved in that summer. The oak tree still stood strong in the backyard, and though it took time, I managed to recreate Grandma's apple cinnamon pie recipe, filling the kitchen with that familiar, comforting aroma once again. Howard Jenkins became a good friend and mentor, helping me navigate the reformed HOA. I even joined the new Architectural Review Committee, determined to ensure rules were applied fairly and reasonably. The experience changed me. I became an advocate for HOA reform and homeowner rights, speaking at community meetings across Oregon and helping other neighborhoods establish proper governance structures for their associations. 3 years later, I still live in Grandma's house on Evergreen Lane. The neighborhood has healed, though the memory of Patricia Miller's reign remains a cautionary tale. New residents moving in are told the story as a reminder of the importance of community involvement and vigilance. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit on my front porch, now properly painted in Lakeside-approved white 42, and reflect on how differently things might have turned out had I not received that chance call from Heritage Title Company. My home could have been just another statistic in Patricia's fraud scheme, another property erased to make way for her illegal developments. Instead, it became the case that brought down her empire and reformed our community. My signature, which she thought would be her path to another illicit profit, became the first thread that, when pulled, unraveled everything she had built. I've learned that homeowners associations, created to protect property values and maintain community standards, can sometimes become vehicles for corruption when left unchecked. But I've also seen how communities can reclaim these organizations, transforming them back into what they were meant to be: democratic entities serving the collective good of their members. Last month, I received a letter from Rachel Thompson. After testifying against Patricia, she had moved to Seattle to start fresh. She wrote that she was doing well and had even joined the board of her new condominium association. "This time," she wrote, "I'm making sure everything is done right." Patricia Miller will remain in federal prison until well into her 80s. Catherine Brooks received a reduced sentence of 8 years for her cooperation. The others involved received various sentences based on their level of participation in the scheme. The story made national news, featured on investigative journalism programs, and discussed in law schools as a case study in HOA fraud. Housing rights advocates used it to push for legislation, providing greater oversight of community associations across the country. For me, the most meaningful outcome was the restoration of trust in our community. Neighbors who had once been afraid to speak up at meetings now actively participated in governance. The atmosphere of fear had been replaced by one of cooperation and transparency. Last week, at our annual community picnic, a new resident asked me about the story behind Patricia's Law, which was now prominently displayed in the community center. As I recounted the tale, I realized how far we had come from those dark days. "So you're the reason we have all these detailed financial reports and meeting minutes posted online?" she asked. I smiled. "Not just me. It took a whole community to reclaim our neighborhood." That evening, as the sun set over lakeside pines, casting long shadows across lawns that no longer had to adhere to Patricia's arbitrary standards. I felt a deep sense of peace. My grandmother's house stood as it had for decades, a testament to resilience and continuity. I often wonder what Grandma Elaine would think of all this. She had always been skeptical of the HOA, quietly bending rules she found unreasonable while maintaining just enough compliance to avoid Patricia's wrath. I like to think she would be proud that her home became the catalyst for positive change. My phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Hernandez, now a good friend. Just heard Patricia's appeal was denied. Thought you'd want to know. I texted back my thanks, grateful for his dedication to the case. Without his thorough investigation, Patricia might have found a way to wriggle free of justice, as she had apparently done before when complaints surfaced. The full extent of Patricia's prior misconduct had come to light during the trial. Before moving to Lakeside Pines, she had served on HOA boards in 2 other states, leaving amid rumors of financial impropriety, but never facing charges. She had refined her methods over the years, becoming more sophisticated and careful until she targeted my grandmother's house. Sometimes I wonder about the small decisions that change our lives' trajectories. If I hadn't inherited the house, if I hadn't been renovating it personally, if I hadn't received that call from the title company, Patricia might still be running her scheme, victimizing more homeowners while maintaining her facade of respectability. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Howard, accompanied by several members of the new HOA board. They had come to invite me to join them as vice president for the coming term. "We need people who understand the importance of doing things right," Howard said, "people who will stand up when they see something wrong." I accepted the position, recognizing both the responsibility and the opportunity it represented. The power that Patricia had abused could instead be used to strengthen our community and protect homeowners' rights. The next morning, I joined a conference call with legislators working on expanding Patricia's law to other states. The experience had made me an unexpected expert on HOA fraud prevention, and I was determined to use that knowledge to help others. "The key," I explained to the lawmakers, "is transparency and accountability. HOA boards need proper oversight, regular audits, and term limits. Homeowners need accessible records and clear grievance procedures." One senator asked about my personal experience. "What would you have done differently, knowing what you know now?" It was a question I had pondered often. "I would have gotten involved sooner," I replied honestly. "Patricia's scheme flourished because too many of us were disengaged. We saw the HOA as an annoying bureaucracy to be avoided rather than a community institution needing our participation." That lesson, the importance of civic engagement at all levels, was perhaps the most valuable outcome of the whole ordeal. I had learned that governance, even at the neighborhood level, requires vigilance and participation. After the call, I walked through my grandmother's house, now truly my home. The renovations were complete, blending modern updates with the historical character she had loved. The oak tree outside my window had new leaves, a reminder that renewal follows even the darkest periods. In the study, I kept a framed copy of the forged document that had started it all, a reminder of how close I had come to losing this place, and of the importance of remaining alert to injustice. The mail arrived, bringing the monthly HOA newsletter. Unlike Patricia's version, which had been filled with violation notices and threats, this one highlighted community achievements, upcoming events, and transparent financial reporting. A small note at the bottom thanked residents for their increased participation in recent meetings. Progress, I thought. Real progress. That afternoon, I met with a group of homeowners from a neighboring community who were concerned about similar issues with their HOA. I shared our experience and offered suggestions for reform. "It doesn't have to be confrontational," I advised them. "Most HOA problems stem from apathy, not malice. When good people get involved, things improve. As they left, one woman lingered behind. My mother lost her home 2 years ago, she confided. The circumstances were similar to what you described: unexpected paperwork, a quick sale. I wonder now if she was another victim. I took her information and promised to have Detective Hernandez look into it. The investigation into Patricia's network was ongoing, with authorities still untangling the web of fraudulent transactions spanning multiple jurisdictions. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting, now held in the community center's main room rather than the small office Patricia had preferred. The space was filled with residents actively participating in discussions about landscaping contracts and pool maintenance, ordinary matters that nonetheless required community input. Howard conducted the meeting efficiently, but without Patricia's authoritarian style. When disagreements arose, he encouraged respectful debate rather than shutting down opposition. After the meeting, several residents approached me to discuss ideas for community improvements. Their engagement reflected the new atmosphere of collaboration that had replaced the former regime of fear and intimidation. Walking home under the stars, I reflected on the journey of the past few years. From discovering a forged signature to helping rebuild a community's governance structure, it had been a transformative experience. My phone rang. It was Marcus Weisberg, my attorney and friend. "Just checking in," he said. "The last of the civil cases was settled today. All the fraudulent property transfers have now been reversed or compensated." "That's excellent news," I replied. "Is everyone getting their homes back?" "Most chose financial settlements, but yes, justice has been served as much as possible. Your case really opened the floodgates, Quinn." We chatted for a few more minutes before saying goodnight. As I continued my walk, I noticed neighbors sitting on porches, children playing in yards past the strict 7 p.m. curfew Patricia had tried to enforce, and gardens that reflected personal taste rather than rigid conformity. This was what a community should be: a place where rules existed to facilitate harmonious living, not to control and exploit residents. The next morning, I received an email from a producer at a national news program. They were doing a follow-up story on the HOA fraud queen, as Patricia was now known in media circles, and wanted my perspective as the whistleblower who brought her down. I agreed to a brief interview, seeing it as another opportunity to raise awareness about HOA fraud and the importance of community vigilance. The producer asked if I could be filmed in front of my grandmother's house, the property that had sparked the investigation. As I stood there the following week, explaining to the camera how I had discovered the fraud, I felt Grandma Elaine's presence, as if she were somehow watching over me and the home she had loved. "What would you say to other homeowners concerned about their HOAs?" the interviewer asked. "Get involved," I replied without hesitation. "Attend meetings. Review financial statements, ask questions, and if something doesn't seem right, keep pushing until you get answers. Our homes are too important to leave their governance to others without oversight." The segment aired nationally, bringing another wave of attention to the issue. I received emails from homeowners across the country sharing similar stories and asking for advice. I responded to as many as I could, directing them to resources and advocacy groups. 6 months later, I testified before a state legislative committee considering expanded protections for homeowners. The room was packed with people affected by abusive HOA practices, each with their own story of arbitrary rules, excessive fines, or board misconduct. As I described Patricia's elaborate fraud scheme and the system that had enabled it, I saw heads nodding in recognition. Many had experienced less extreme but similar abuses of power. The committee chair asked what I considered the most important reform needed. "Accountability," I answered. HOA boards wield significant power over our daily lives and our largest investments. They need proper oversight, regular independent audits, and clear consequences for misconduct. No HOA president should be able to operate like Patricia Miller did. The resulting legislation, passed 6 months later, established the strongest HOA oversight framework in the country. Other states began considering similar measures, using Oregon's law as a model. Today, 5 years after uncovering Patricia's scheme, I still live in my grandmother's house. The oak tree continues to flourish, and the neighborhood has become the kind of community she would have loved: friendly, supportive, and fair. I serve as a resource for HOA reform advocates nationwide, sharing our story as both a warning and a roadmap for positive change. The work isn't glamorous, but it matters: protecting people's homes from those who would abuse positions of trust. Patricia Miller will remain in prison until 2049. Her conviction stands as a powerful reminder that even small-scale governance requires integrity and transparency. As for Lakeside Pines, our community has been transformed. The HOA still exists, still enforces reasonable standards, but now does so with homeowner input and proper checks and balances. Property values have increased, not through manipulation and fraud, but because people genuinely want to live in a well-managed, friendly neighborhood. Every year on the anniversary of Patricia's conviction, we hold a community celebration not to gloat over her downfall, but to commemorate our collective recommitment to fair governance and neighborly cooperation. My signature, once forged to steal my inheritance, instead became the first domino that toppled a criminal enterprise and sparked a movement for reform. It's a reminder that sometimes our greatest contributions come not from what we plan, but from how we respond when faced with injustice. And that, I believe, would make Grandma Elaine proud.